our sports day, remember the rectangular yellow hurdles you'd have to jump over and over again until you've jumped over all the hurdles fast enough so you can win the race? Now, I want you to imagine that a few players have been manipulated. Instead of the original number of hurdles, there are extra ones for them to jump over. Spectators can see this fault. Some try to take a stand while others ultimately ignore it. I want you to take this analogy and interpret this in the real-life world. Men are oftentimes the players with a fair number of hurdles to overcome, while women are those with extra hurdles placed in front of them. Colleagues, coworkers, and even friends ignore this discrimination and refuse to do anything about it. In the words of Taylor Swift from her song, The Man, "I'm so sick of running as fast as I can, wondering if I'd get there quicker if I was a man." Women are running as fast as they can, yet the hurdles for them just keep on increasing. From cinema to finance, science to the arts, discrimination against women in the workplace is an infamous problem that has plagued society for centuries. Companies and organizations worldwide are working tirelessly to advocate for the equality of women's rights, trying to rally support from the governments and public. And their efforts have not gone to waste. The Bureau of Labor Statistics suggests that women represented 56.8% of the U.S. workforce in 2019, compared to 20% in the 1920s. Despite such a change, there has been an unspoken underrepresentation of women in the workforce, which makes me wonder, what is the true reason for such discrimination against women in society? Where did it all begin? And why has it grown to such a disproportionate state today? Let's take a look at the media. Newspapers, magazines, films, books, music, you name it. Every form of media plays a role in shaping how we see the world. After extensive pattern analysis, one thing becomes clear. The representation of women follows an eerily repetitive formula. I've broken this formula down into three main categories: character, clothing, and culture. Female characters are often subject to stereotypical representation, a concept explored by Stuart Hall, who argued that media doesn't reflect reality, it represents it, often in ways that reinforce dominant ideologies. In this case, women are frequently portrayed as lacking strength, intelligence, and independence, placed in secondary or supporting roles there to glorify the male lead. They're rarely the agents of action, instead positioned as what Laura Mulvey famously coined as to be looked atness in her male gaze theory. Women as passive objects for male objectification rather than active participants in the narrative. This brings me on to clothing. Visual codes like costumes and mise-en-scène, often depicting women in revealing or sexualized attire. These stylistic choices are not accidental. They contribute to an ongoing sexual objectification, reinforcing the false idea that a woman's primary value lies in her appearance. And finally, there's culture. When these narrow portrayals are repeated across media texts distributed globally, they help normalize these ideas in real life, a phenomenon Gerbner identified as cultivation theory. Essentially, the more we see women portrayed in a restrictive way, the more we begin to accept it as a societal truth. Let's put this all into practice with the iconic Bond girl. Now, let's apply our categories. Character. She is typically feisty and beautiful, yet ultimately disposable, existing to serve the male protagonist, James Bond. Clothing. 5-slit dresses, figure-hugging gowns, the classic male gaze uniform. And culture. The James Bond film franchise is valued to be at worth $7.9 billion and is the highest grossing spy series of all time. With such a global reach, the stereotypes that it perpetrates can have amplified impacts on cultures for generations to come. Further, such perceptions of women can have damaging impacts on them in the workforce. Despite often surpassing men in ability, misconceptions make it very difficult for women to break into a system. A 2015 study by the Society for Personality and Social Psychology suggests that when a woman occupies a superior organizational role, men in subordinate positions tend to feel threatened and behave more assertively towards them, trying to advocate more for themselves. I experienced and saw this firsthand with my mother, who after returning to work post-maternity was sidelined in favor of less experienced colleagues. Her ideas were dismissed, her efforts were overlooked, and eventually she resigned to take on a much more senior role at a firm that actually valued her talent. And don't get me wrong, her stand was powerful, but not all women often feel empowered to do the same. In fact, 4 in 10 women globally report workplace gender discrimination, showing just how widespread and persistent the issue remains. Thankfully, though, there has been a new era of powerful women dominating industries across the globe. My favorite success story comes from my favorite singer, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift was only 16 years old when she made her big break with her debut album. Naturally, this has led to her having to face and overcome various barriers throughout her 20-year and running career. When being interviewed by Vogue, Swift said, "Men in the industry saw me as a kid. I was a lanky, scrawny, overexcited young girl who reminded them more of their little niece or daughter, rather than a successful woman in business." She added that it's fine to infantilize a girl's success and say, how cute that she's having a few hit songs. But the second it becomes formidable, when I started playing stadiums, when I started to look like a woman, that wasn't as cool anymore. This was a similar picture that the media was painting of her. Instead of a successful musical genius who is rising to the top as she so well deserved, she was portrayed as this pretty young girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Due to this, Swift mentioned in her 2019 documentary, Miss Americana, that she began to develop an eating disorder in order to stay thin, under the false impression that staying skinny was what was making the public happy. Thankfully, though, over time, she began to surround herself with people who she actually loved, started to write music for herself and not for others. Taylor Swift began to address unconventional topics in her music, which has led to her astronomical success. Having won a total of 562 awards in her career, a fan following of 1.3 billion Swifties worldwide, and 12 incredibly successful albums, which have each made their mark on the music industry. Taylor Swift decided to be strong, not silent, powerful, not powerless, intelligent, not lucky. But most importantly, she was herself and not what the rest wanted her to be. Cast your mind back to the hurdles game. As usual, there are hurdles one would have to jump over and over until you've cleared all the hurdles fast enough so you can win the race. Again, a few players have been manipulated. Instead of the original number of hurdles, there are extra ones for them to jump over. But this time the story ends differently. This time, one person from the audience stands up. They stand up and demand for a change. They point out the issue to the referee and insist on it being amended. The referee quickly silences them and urges them to sit down, but it's far too late. One by one, every single person from that audience stands up. They demand for a change in the rules, a change in the way that women are being presented. As you leave this room, I want every single one of you to be a member of that audience. Demand for a change in the representation and treatment of women in society. Be the voice that millions are praying to have. And someday, women in the hurdle race may begin to think, I'd be a fearless leader. I'd be an alpha type. When everyone believes ya, what's that like? Taylor Swift from her song, The Man. Cast your mind back to the hurdles game. As usual, there are hurdles that one would have to jump over and over again until you've jumped over all the hurdles fast enough so you can win the race. Now, again, a few players have been manipulated. Instead of the original number of hurdles, there are extra ones for them to jump over. But this time, the story ends differently. Instead of the audience ignoring this discrimination, One person stands up. They point out the issue to the referee and insist on it being amended. The referee quickly silences them, urges them to sit down, but it's far too late. One by one, every single member of that audience stands up, and they demand for a change in the rules, a change in the way that women were being represented. As you leave this room, I want every single one of you to be a member of that audience. Demand for a change in the representation and treatment of women in society. Be the voice that millions are praying to have. And someday, people in the hurdle race may begin to think, I'd be a fearless leader. I'd be an alpha type. When everyone believes ya, what's that like? Taylor Swift from her song, The Man.